Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Camille Essick. I'm host of the Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast where innovators and Creators Connect. Be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe. Follow us. We are streaming across various platforms such as iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Follow us on Facebook at the Speaker Podcast, also here on YouTube and Instagram at Camille.Essick. And I would love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at thespeakerpodcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't heard, this week I did launch my new e-course. I'm really excited about that. It's something for podcasters and creatives. I have an 87-page e-course. That's right, y'all. 87 pages of tools and resources in addition to podcast templates. And I'm also throwing in as a bonus 2 of my podcasting ebooks. So you're getting a whole digital bundle. You're getting an e-course and all of the things, because why? I want you to succeed. I want you to build a platform and a table for your people and bring your squad along. With that being said, y'all, he is a brother and friend to the show, to the point so much that he has his own playlist on my channel. So if you go to YouTube, the Speaker Podcast, and type in my name and go to playlist, you will see a playlist featuring all the conversations and drops featuring Evan Brown. Coach Ev, welcome back.
What's up? I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So it's been a minute. I know
Yeah.
I see you at church and there'll be a lot going on. So it's hard to speak during that time because you crying, I'm crying, everybody's crying. But I just wanted to say thank you for supporting the podcast. I really, really appreciate it so much. But those that are not familiar with who you are at this time, they should know by now if they're watching. But just give a recap about a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name's Evan Brown. I go by Coach Ev. I am a serial entrepreneur, a friend, a brother, just a all-around good person. That's what I'll introduce myself as. I've got a lot of experience in the business development space, kind of primarily hitting into branding and marketing. I have a nonprofit called the Business Builders Collaborative, where I am going into underserved and underprivileged areas to teach high school students that look like me about business. You know, one of the things that I'm passionate about, I've been in the for-profit space for so long, but I'm stepping into a vein of true impact that I do believe is going to be transformative for what I do, and also going to set me up to do whatever I'm supposed to do next for the rest of my life. So that's a little bit about me. I just love helping people. You know, I'm one of those that I just believe in treating people right and helping them become whatever they're supposed to become, especially if it's within my wheelhouse. So that's me.
Awesome.
I'm fun.
It's gonna be a little extra look carrying on tonight because he had a birthday a couple of days ago. So if we show out a little bit tonight, then because my birthday was like 3 weeks ago. His birthday was a couple of days ago. So I'm not an asparagus, but you know what I'm saying. It's in that calendar of the things. But yeah, so we might be a little extra tonight, just as a heads up. So and you said you had one more thing.
No, I don't think so. If I did, I didn't mean to.
No, it's all good. So one of the things I love talking to you about, you have this amazing place in Atlanta. It's called Therapy ATL, and it's one of those spaces for creators and entrepreneurs. So can you kind of let us know a little more about Therapy ATL and what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so I am blessed to be a partner in a wonderful resource and safe space and good food and good energy called Therapy Lounge ATL. I've been a part for the last 2 years. It has been a beautiful journey. One of the things that I believe is I believe in entrepreneurship, and I believe into stepping into lanes that you know nothing of if you feel a space to, and just learning. And so therapy has been a great learning place. It is a restaurant, bar, lounge. We have some of the most amazing food Atlanta has to offer. Some of our head chefs one of our head chefs is from Senegal. So it's just everything is just really delightful. It's not like, Black people stuff all the time. Like your lemon pepper.
It's not Sunday dinner. That's what he's saying. It ain't
like your lemon
Thanksgiving.
pepper is like fresh lemon pepper. It's wonderful. So it's just really something just amazing. So if you're ever in Atlanta, come on by. We're open every day. Well, Tuesday through Sunday. We open at 12 noon during the day. It's at that point in time, it's the office bar. It's a safe space for students, work from home professionals, small business owners to come in, have lunch, do some homework, free Wi-Fi, smoke hookah, drink tea, whatever your thing is. But most important, you're able to get there and get a lot of work done and get things accomplished. So yeah, it's a great place to be.
Awesome. Now hold on. Now I'm planning on sliding down this weekend. So where are you all located? Like, is it Midtown? Like, where is
Yeah,
it?
it's in Broadcliff. It's outside of Buckhead for those who probably, if you're from Atlanta, to be outside of Buckhead. But you can always just Google Therapy Lounge ATL. It'll lead you right there to it.
Okay. Now my go-to, I'm a salmon girl. So I
Okay.
need to know, do you all have very fresh salmon? And I would say I'm a salmon snob because I lived in the Navy. So I'm so
Okay.
accustomed to living by water and getting the freshest salmon. And if
Yeah.
I taste any hint of gamey, I'm like, oh, this isn't fresh. So, like, how is your menu? What are some things that your clientele seem to love? Like, what are some of those favorites?
Yeah, so one of our most popular dishes is our red snapper. The tofu pasta is pretty popular as well. Of course, it's Atlanta, so the wings are always a quick go-to. One of my favorites is our sweet chili tenders.
Okay.
I mean, they just do everything I need them to do. I haven't had anything on our menu that's not good. And our
Okay.
cocktails are craft cocktails, quality, handmade with freshest ingredients, and they're amazing.
Awesome. I love it. I'm gonna have to come check you all out. You never know.
Come
So,
on.
as we hop right in and we're talking about safe spaces, what are the one of the main things as far as and when you're here, we're talking about from the brother's perspective,
Mhm.
as far as creating safe spaces for you and your brother and along your journey. And into that meaning like being able to teach each other, but not criticize and tear each other down, but having a space where you can talk and share and it's in a safe space.
Yeah, well, I think the beginning for a safe space for anyone, no matter what your gender is just communication.
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that we just have to talk more, and unfortunately, I guess in addition to talking, that includes tough conversations. Of course, to me, and because I'm more so probably if I speak for myself, I'm one of the more aggressive friends when it comes to conversations. I'm not going to let anything kind of simmer too long because once you've decided that this person's a person of value in your life, whether friend, romantically, whatever it may be, you want to invest your love by way of getting to know them or understanding what may be going on and also fostering a space where they can share whatever that may need to be so that you can actually build a healthy dynamic. So I think the beginning of that always begins with communication. That's the art of that's how we do. That's how we communicate is through talking. I think, but we also have to be willing to forcefully have certain conversations that are going to be filled with discomfort,
Yeah.
because relationship building is about being being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's a key component to it, because if you have if it's always comfortable, there's probably a surface level dynamic, which means that come a hard time or a frustrating moment, maybe one person has no one to lean to for support because everything is always so surface level. So therefore we're not willing to show each other our wounds or show each other that, that we may be in pain, whatever that may look like, whether it's temporary or long term. But all that can be like diverted by simply just talking to one another and being honest.
That's good. And even in that, you mentioned something that made me think about, ego
Hmm.
or the protection of self ego. And then how do you define those shortcomings? Like how do you define that? And to say one, just knowing like, hey, this is a weak space for me, a weak area or shortcoming, and then once you've identified it, defining it, then addressing it. And how do you do so within your man group?
Yeah, well, ego is a pride thing, but you can't have effective community if you're full of pride, or pride is a still a major pillar in your life.
Mm,
And I think it kind of goes back to a space where we have to just acknowledge that nobody's life is perfect.
right,
Everybody's stuff stinks. Whether mine may be the same stench of yours, like we all have something.
right.
But you can't build effective community with egos in place, and because that ego is really that pillar behind that ego is really just pride. And that's just not a way for proper human connection. Is you full of pride, because people who are full of pride, they lie, they cover things, they cover themselves, they really operate from a place of it's always got to be me protecting me, when that's
Yeah.
not what community is about. Community is about finding a place to be protected by other people. And
Mm,
you can't have that, and you can't embrace that or tap into that if you are always protecting yourself. Now of course that's comes from circumstances. Circumstances has taught us, or even circumstances, culture, and society has positioned us, or has positioned certain things in our minds that we always have to be the one that protects you. But that's not what community is about. Community says, hey, you know what? You don't have to protect you alone. I'll protect you as well. But you got to get rid of the ego thing. The ego just is never going to work in a space where you want to have community, but you have to want to have community first.
Yeah, and that one of the red flags that I've noticed with that is the deflection. It's always attempting to flip it back on the other person. Well, they did this, or what about that? And it's like, no, put that mirror back on yourself. Look at you. Let's be accountable. And going into one of our other points, as far as when we are removing ourselves, but also in that space of extending grace and being accountable, and that's part of it. Like when you remove the ego and just say, "Hey, it's me."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
And removing the ego is really just vulnerability in action.
yes.
Like there's no way to grow in any kind of person-based dynamic or human-based dynamic if you're still not willing to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
It's just never going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, but I think the refusal to do that, or not being so apt to want to do that or inclined to do that, I think is sourced out of trauma, because you feel like, well, the last time I was vulnerable, the last time I was open, someone took those things and they weaponized it, and so now other people are paying for something that someone did previously. And it's like, at the same time, I understand that an individual might be hurt in that space, but you do need to address the trauma and the root of that and heal in that area, because if not, it's going to show up in other areas of your life and other relationships, and not just romantic, but just day-to-day connections and networking.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a principle where it's like I call it behaviors bleed. Like when
Mhm.
you start good behaviors, it bleeds into other areas. It's like going to bed early means you wake up the next day with more energy, which means you can be productive and all those kind of things like that. But then also when you have negative behaviors in place, they also bleed over as well. So that it's one of those things you got to recognize, you got to pick your poison. Which direction am I going to go? And most importantly, how committed am I to getting to that particular place? And that always goes back to an internal checks and balances system. Like how bad do you really want it? And
Mhm.
so often we've made how bad do you want it a monetary or a money thing or a success thing. But sometimes it really could be something as simple as peace. Or how bad do you want like quality community or quality friendships? But it's always, it just goes back to self. I think that in my perspective, people are just, they don't want things bad enough. Because when you
Can you
want,
unpack that a little bit more?
yeah, like acquiring things requires you to change. And people to
Mm,
me are not committed to or willing to change. And often, especially in people of color, we wait for these major catastrophes for us to recognize like it's time for me to change. No, you got the hint a year
yeah.
ago, but
Being, like, proactive,
instead of reactive.
reactive, yeah.
And it's even like for those who may be like of the Christian faith, like often we will wait to or live in a way where God has to quote unquote grab us by our throat or any of the other crazy
Yeah, I
stuff.
know what you're saying,
Like,
like some type
like
of miracle or something
yeah,
big and just dramatic, and it's like,
no,
for example, like, you have diabetes and he's been saying, change your diet," but then when the doctor's like, "You might lose your foot," then you want everybody to fast and pray, and you want a
no,
miracle.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I totally
That's a
understand.
preventative disease. I'm writing a paper
Yeah,
on those right now, preventative disease.
um,
And it's kind of one of those things where we have to really take a moment to say what was preventable in my
mm,
life. Everything we can't control. There's some things that happen literally beyond our scope of control, but there comes a space or a moment where was this preventable, or how long did I let this go unaddressed, unchecked, or undealt with, and it became a catastrophe in my life that it did not have to become. That's my fault.
yeah.
But
So
that
what
takes
does that look like when you're around, like, your guy group? And the reason being is because this conversation is from the male perspective. When you see one of your homeboys or your bros or whatever, and it's like, "Hey, man, you're messing up," how do you break the ice and have that conversation as far as more of like a intervention type situation?
Well, anybody, and this is just my opinion,
Yeah.
anybody that needs to break the ice with those they call brothers or friends, you guys may not have made it to brothers and friends space or depth, in
Yeah.
my opinion. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with having associates. There's nothing wrong with that, but for you to label someone as a brother or a friend in your life and vice versa, they shouldn't have to warm the car before they drive it. Let's just
Oh,
get
that's
right.
good.
You're
Yeah.
you are not doing what you told me you want to do. You are not, I'm looking at your life as a brother, and I'm not seeing the things that you say you want to come out of it. And I know it's not because of a lack of resources or lack of creativity or lack of ability. You just aren't doing what you said you wanted us to hold you accountable to do.
Mhm.
So I really just I think it's just a matter of getting right to the point. And realistically, I'm not. It's, may be aggressive, but I think that men over the age of 30 shouldn't be having friend issues. Like
Oh, that's good though. I like that.
we shouldn't. We've lived long enough to build relationships.
Like falling out. You
It's
too old to be falling out with
yeah,
people.
it's not hard to do life with people, but
Yeah.
as I said in the beginning, it requires a willingness to communicate. Now, I do think that it changes generationally, because the things that I'm willing to talk about with my friends off the fly of a hat, my dad's generation, because my dad's in his 60s, close to his 70s, that
Okay.
may not have been the way they did life, or that may not have been
Right.
a very common communication practice. But I'm a part of a generation that will tell you, I ain't happy.
Mhm.
I'm a part of a generation that will tell you I'm depressed, you
Yeah.
know. But it's I think that's a beautiful thing, because we're willing to at least give language or context to what's happening with us. Then of course now there's a space for us to do something with it, versus those who chose to work through it and not work through it, but really work
Yeah.
over it. And that's a leads to an early grave.
That's good, and I know people have been talking about this on social media all week, but as you were speaking, Evan, the thought came to my mind, over the weekend, I watched the new Tyler Perry movie, Divorce in the Black,
Mhm.
and there was a dynamic between the character Dallas and his best friend Jim,
Mhm.
and based on the context of what I saw out of the movie, they were all from the small town in Georgia. They all grew up together. Dallas came from the abusive home. He tried to go the right way, but his family pulled him left. And
Mhm.
his friend Jim became an attorney, had a wife, nice, healthy
Mhm.
marriage. Although he did cheat on his wife once, they were able to rebound from that and go on. But it was like I noticed Jim I kept wondering, like, why was Jim still his friend after all these years? And I began to think, was it because of guilt? Because survivor's remorse? Like he could have probably have gone down that path too, but he went this way. Was it out of pity because he knew Dallas didn't have any other really sound voices in his life? And I really began to analyze, like, why was he still air quotes tolerating him? And he was almost I want to say on his last leg with Dallas's character. And then at some point in the movie, it was like Dallas was like, "You're letting your wife tell you who you can be friends with," but it was all rooted out of manipulation and jealousy. And at some point, Jim ended up kind of like, letting Dallas go to the grave because of how bad things got in the movie. But I just wonder how many guys possibly have that one friend they know doesn't mean any well, doesn't really wish him well, but why do you still entertain this person?
I want to pick my words. Um, so I saw that movie, and
Okay.
I noticed that dynamic. But one of the things that it highlights to me is that, if I've appointed someone as a brother, I just don't throw them to the side because they're in a rough season
Right,
or they're in a rough run. Like that's just my opinion.
right.
I have a great friend right now that we're not necessarily on the best terms, but that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that I'm not your brother and still not mine. You
Yeah,
know, so even the removal or the I see a lot of conversations about getting rid of people and moving all this stuff,
yeah,
and that's typically not always something. The conversations that I see are not always led by men, and I do understand that sometimes you do have to remove people because they're needed. But what I saw in that movie was, as you said, they're childhood friends. I saw a young man move on, try to get away from one side of his family, has a wife, moved to a whole different city, but
yeah,
moment of pain, he went back to that space. I applaud the fact that Jim still like chose to stick with him to a certain degree. Like, hey, yo, you know what? Go ahead and leave here. Don't come in here. You know, when his wife called, it was like, hey, he's outside. He showed up. He consistently intervened on behalf of his friend, even though his friend was not in the best mental place.
Or just flat out wrong. He still
Yeah,
tried.
he
Yeah.
still tried to do certain things, and so I think to me that's an act. I mean, of course, it's a movie, so we don't know what really happened.
Right.
But to me, that's what brotherhood is. Just because you're in a rough space doesn't always mean I have to throw you away.
Yeah, but how long do you allow that? Because it seems, again, just out of context of the movie, this had been going on since, you know, their childhood as far as his behavior, but he still tried to, like, stick with him. But is there a cutoff? Like, is there a boundary? And we see in the movie, Dallas went on a path to the point where it cost him his life. So it's like, how long do you invest in that type of relationship or friendship with a friend?
Yeah, I don't think there's a cutoff until you feel as though you've hit that point where I've had enough.
Like your capacity, you've reached
Yeah,
capacity.
because I have unsubscribed from that remove everybody type of ideology and
Yeah,
perspective, because sometimes you're not supposed to. And I'll now, this is just even for those who call themselves Christians or believers. I know it's very popular to say I need to cut people off, need to remove all these people. But what happens how do you know that your God-given assignment is not to be that positive beacon in their life because you know what, you have the threshold where what would ruin and kill someone else doesn't really pain you that much. I have been in what I consider to be lopsided friendships, but it's because my tolerance for certain things is a lot higher than the average person. So I'm not running home crying because the person that I know to be in transition or kind of in a developmental stage is still doing stuff that's kind of bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's just I don't believe in just kind of getting rid of people anymore all the time. Now there are spaces where you need to,
and I was gonna say I hear you and I agree, but I did have a situation with someone I had known for years, and I had to because it had gotten disrespectful as far as basic things about me that there was no respect. And it just got to the point where I kept attempting to be the friend and show up and be there. But then I was feeling like, man, now I'm feeling compromised, trying to salvage this friendship. But now parts of my life, I'm feeling compromised. And it was like, is this really a friendship I need to hold on to? And not that I threw it was two people away. I just had to pull back and shift the proximity because and I'm not gonna go into detail online, but it was not healthy. It
I
was not
definitely
healthy.
understand that,
Yeah.
but I think it's paramount for us to keep in mind that sometimes the issues that men have in their friendships and brotherhoods are not quite the same that women may have in their dynamics. Now because now I'm not saying that men do friendship well, because you know, but a lot of that, probably the reason that certain issues don't go as deep is because we don't do friendship or brotherhood at the depth in which we should.
Because the women are emotionally deeper than men. I
But
mean,
for
well, I
example,
guess
look at sorority and fraternity culture. We're both in frats and sororities.
yeah.
Like girls and their line sisters, for lifers.
Yeah.
You know, dudes and their line brothers, you probably got a good 3 to 4, depending on how large your line is, that you will forever do life with, but you'll still love the rest of your brothers unconditionally. So I think it's really just a matter of a proximity of how each individual gender handles friendship or handles brotherhood, because you know, sometimes because of men, as those of men who do not believe in, I guess, articulate, or I guess, deep communication, sometimes men just aren't talking about certain things. Their brotherhoods are surface level. Now, I'm not saying it'll always be like that, nor do I feel like that's the best way to handle it. However, it's just a reality of where the depth of friendship goes, or depth of brotherhood goes on both sides when it comes to the gender. Because you know, I can't think of the last time I threw a guy friend away, or I threw a brother away. So I'm always like, I understand, like, you have the same pressures I have. We're black men in America.
Yeah.
Culture's on our back. Society's on our back, our families are on our back, it's pressures everywhere. How you fold to the certain pressures may not be the same way, but I feel as though we're still going in the same direction. Hey, I got friends that may not agree with everything that I do, but to me,
Right.
that doesn't change the fact that we are brothers in the same fight. Now, but if there's a moment where it's, as you mentioned, like some severe disrespect, like one of the things that I thought was completely disrespectful in the movie that we mentioned was when Dallas decided to make a moment to throw Jim under the bus.
Yes, I was thinking about that, and I was like,
That's a moment.
that
That's
was a
on
moment.
someone again. However, comma, if you stop, if we stop for a second, and think about the fact that as the Jim, because I'm naturally one of the patient friends. I can sit back and say, hey, you know what? Okay, I know the trauma my brothers lived through. I know that's not the trauma that I've gone through. So I can look at a moment like that but realistically, Jim made the error. Dallas didn't make him sleep with that lady.
Yeah.
Now, granted,
But it was wrong how he tried to weaponize that to cause division between him and his wife. And I think that was rooted out of jealousy and
I
just
think it was really just I think it was pain and how
pain. Yeah.
pain and trauma was showing up in his life. But I would tell you if I were Jim and that happened to me, I would not automatically just say I got to throw my brother away, because that young man, if we think about what happened to him, he had to take his father's life for beating on his mother. You know what I'm saying? He's thinking about the guilt that he's experienced being the one that left the small town and moved to Atlanta, has this wife, has this big house, but yet you go back to his hometown, his family lives
in a trailer park. Yeah, poor.
There's so many layers to that story as to why I would not automatically be like, hey, that was wrong. You didn't have to do me like that. But if I would have done that in the first place, that wouldn't have been something to be put on the table.
Yeah.
And yes, that's painful, but is that forgivable when I can say, hey, you know what? This man hasn't known whether he was coming or going for 25
a long time. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's
I
a
mean,
threshold
you
thing.
have a good point.
It's
Yeah.
a threshold and a maturity component, because what may be I can get over it to one person may be a hell no, I'll never talk to you again to another.
Right. Yeah. That's good. And not to focus on the movie, but that is a good point, just to see the dynamic of the men in the movie as far as between Jim and Dallas because of that. And you really brought out some really good points, because it was rooted in pain, which we saw in the bathroom scene when he broke down crying, talking about, and that was like the one time we really saw what I saw the little boy.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many, particularly our Black men, are carrying things, and that little boy
Everybody is.
never feels safe enough to be that open. And the only time it was under the influence of alcohol.
And do you notice even in that moment, like the next scene was him coming down the steps, acting as if nothing happened.
Yeah.
Because he has been conditioned to, after weakness, you have to jump right back up and get back to being strong and being this person. Now, that's a societal pressure, and it's not right, but it's like that just kind of shows the conditioning of Black men. And for example, to me, I'm just kind of like, I wouldn't throw him away 100%, because especially when I've known you your entire life, because I don't want to make it about the movie, but it's like it's a great caveat to recognize that when you've done extensive amount of time with somebody, you've seen the good and the bad. And when you have a lot of information or context, sometimes it's easier to understand and give that grace and that patience that allows you to still remain in friendship while somebody's in what I call to be process.
Yeah. And then we don't know what Jim may have seen behind closed doors with him or what he shared. Like,
because men have trauma bonds too.
Yes. And we know nothing about Jim's background. We don't know. So who's to say? It's just a lot. And I always said if I were to choose another occupation, I probably would have been a therapist, because I just love breaking down psychologies of people and the why, and being analytical to figure out like what happened there, particularly with our brothers in this social climate. I think is so important. And one of the reasons why I have these conversations is to give brothers like you a safe space so we can kind of dig into those conversations, just because I feel like there's a lot of negative narratives out there. And I'm like, why can't we not have conversations where it's not man versus woman or the blue pill, red pill, and just have an open, honest conversation and view things from other perspectives. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. I think that's really good, Evan, as far as looking at the deeper level of particularly what black men in our culture are dealing with. It's something you pointed to as far as acting like it never happened. Like, because women, particularly black women, we have so many outlets where we can express our feelings, girl boss brunch and prayer retreats and all these things that we can do, and exhale and girls weekend, and society doesn't attack our orientation for being emotional, or girl, walking your feminine power, yes, queen, we hear all this stuff. But when a man does it, when a black man does it, it's like his orientation is questioned, or he's viewed as weak, or he's sus, and all this stuff. But it's like, when we take the gender away, I'm like, he's a person with
Mhm.
feelings. Why can he not express those feelings? Whether if you're sad, if you're happy, if you're stressed, and it has nothing to do with your orientation. You're just a person having a human moment.
Mhm. I don't want to get soundbited, but who attacks who when it comes to, like, who do you see attacking men when they choose to take these moments of vulnerability? It's a mixture of insecure men or maybe immature men, but it's also women. So we can't act like black women are not a part of, I don't want to say the problem, but they in past have found ways to contribute to that unknowingly.
I agree, because there is a demographic that feeds into that, but
Mm-hmm.
then you have women like me, which I consider an ally, that I'm on the other side of that. So I'm not gonna disagree with you, because I've seen
Mm-hmm.
that too, and I'm like, why is that an issue?
I've scrolled social media and I will see, like, the spiritual world, the shade room. They post a black man or a black actor and I guess in an attire that is not per se traditional for our African American community. The first 10 comments ripping him to shred and calling him out of his name are coming from black women.
But the question is why? Like, why is there such a stereotype as if he's not wearing gray joggers, a wife beater, and Tim's, then he's not masculine?
Well, that may be a question you have to ask other women.
This is a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
this is
I really
yes,
can answer that because that's something that I've noticed for a long time. It's like women bash men tremendously.
yeah.
Like,
There, it's
and
on both ends
sometimes
too.
sometimes it's not always very like aggressive and nasty. Sometimes it's the subtle stuff.
Hmm.
It's like, well, but then you have like half of or a conglomerate of women saying we want black men to be expressive and more in tune with their emotions and how they feel and navigating through these spaces. But then we got another larger, not even larger, a louder group that is saying, "Oh, he gay, he's sus. Then nobody want no man that cry." Ooh. It puts black men in a really ugly space that makes them do things like what what Dallas did. Cried on his wife's shoulder, confessed to how he had basically killed his dad, then get up the next morning and say, I gotta walk down these steps, look in this woman's face who tried to talk to him about what he did, and act as if nothing ever happened. Because now he's looking at her like, I don't want you thinking I'm weak. You already
Yeah.
I'm weak. Think about how the unsaid things in that movie. Like very clear he worked a blue collar job or
Hmm.
a manual labor job. She works at the bank. Her and her friend are carpool, and you see them, they're dressed very nice, they're dressed very
Yeah.
professionally. We see him in plaid button-ups and jeans the
And
entire movie.
Tim's and dirty and
We see
sweaty.
her family's house. It is like a old, nice South Southern home. She says
Hmm.
her own bedroom still intact.
Yes.
We see his place. We see the outside of a trailer park where it's the grass
Clothes.
isn't cut.
Yeah.
So it's like we see all these things these other elements that create a space for him to not ever feel vulnerable because
Hmm.
he probably looks at his wife as she's kind of, even whether it's said or not, she's out of my league.
Yes, I was about to say that. And did you hear what was said during the funeral? Because you had to really listen and catch it. I know a lot of people were tripping about taking the body of the casket, but
Mhm.
if you heard what they were saying, they said, it might have been her dad, the pastor who's doing the eulogy, that Dallas tried not to go down the path of his brothers,
Mhm. His dad
but
said
they
that.
pulled him in. And
Mhm.
I wonder if his brother saw the potential of Dallas and what he was trying to do, and it was like a crabs in a barrel thing, and they pulled him in because they
Mhm,
were naming some of the atrocities they did in the town, like, the crimes, the
mhm.
assaults and thing. And I was like, oh, his brothers are a handful. So it was like, I wonder if they bullied him or guilted him into that life, like, "You just gonna leave us like this? You think you're
Mhm.
better?" So I just kinda wonder if that was, but I was listening to some of the
Yeah.
undercurrent of the ad libs, and I was like, "Oh," because I
Well, there
watched it for the first time to say I saw it, but then the second time I watched it, I was really trying to pick up those little goose eggs in the
yeah.
movie.
Well, there are 2 things to highlight in that. The leader of the witch hunt was the mom.
Mm,
She was the loud voice, the black woman, right? And she attacked the other black she was the loud voice on the other side. That's speaking of the brothers, I think it was 4 of them or 4 of them. The older brother, you can see he stepped into the protective role more than one time, like say, Dallas, get out of here. Had a better relationship with his wife. Like you can tell that he was the older brother, he was the more mature one, but those other 2 were probably a little bit more of the hellions that kind of got in the way. But
yeah.
in short, in totality, I think it's a matter of everybody growing up, everybody understanding what maturity looks like, but also, yeah, everybody growing up.
Yeah, and before I don't wanna just stay on the movie, but one thing about the mom, I wondered by her being in that abusive life, because I was looking at her and thinking she looked older than she probably was, and if you look at the age of her sons, probably back to back, having them maybe early,
Mhm,
and in between the abuse, the kids were coming, you know what I'm saying?
mhm,
And so I wonder the cycle of abuse, maybe she felt like, at one time I probably was the pretty girl, but I've had these kids, I married this abusive man. I mean, and just see like
mhm,
her weight and how she, because one thing about women, when they're in an emotional space, it would eventually manifest on the outside, whether if you don't really love yourself, you don't care about yourself. And we saw how she didn't care about her hair, she taking off her clothes in church. Like I think it was her way of saying, I've had it on so many different levels, but it came out as anger and frustration and being vile. And so there's just so many things I was trying to deduce out of that movie and in those moments. It just made me wonder that cycle of abuse. Was she molested as a child? Like all these different things. So I looked at everything and it was kind of like hurt people, you know, and it perpetuated into the relationship with Dallas and Jim too. So
because hurt people do hurt people.
yeah. I think this is a really good conversation as far as that. I do agree with your points as far as accountability, and I just always appreciate your perspective as far as when we have these in-depth conversation. And the last point before we wrap things up, as far as choosing maturity on a consistent basis. We try to do that. We're always trying to be better people. But how do you handle the times that you don't always choose maturity and we choose to be petty, or if they gonna go low, we gonna go lower. Like, how do we handle those moments just as people within our community, um, to work to be more consistent in our maturity as far as the choices we make and etc.
Well, you have to first decide like what is per se maturity and immaturity to you, and then what is self advocacy and you protecting yourself.
Mhm.
Because as a people, we have been conditioned to take the short end of the stick. Like we've been given the short end of the stick all the time. So therefore, in certain scenarios, you know, people want you to choose peace, choose maturity. No, I'm going to choose to advocate for myself. Like,
Mhm.
for an example, I am somebody that I'm not extremely argumentative, but you're not going to tell me the sky's red and it's blue.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think it really goes down to, is it really immaturity for me to meet people where they met me? Or is this my moment to teach them a lesson? I mean, I can't. I've unsubscribed from a lot of those things that says, you always have to be this bigger person.
Mm.
I'm a human being, and also if it's a moment where I forget to be the bigger person, I'm not gonna beat myself up for it. But it's a moment, often sometimes, where you've shown someone that I really may not be the person to play with or to teach people. Sometimes you have to show them from a negative inverse, especially with people of color, because we have been taught things negatively. Often people learn, okay, you're not the one to play with by you choosing to show them I'm not the one to play with. I know it's totally contrary to what people want to choose this approach, but
No, I
we don't,
absolutely
don't want.
understand.
I
Yeah,
think
what
that
you're
Black
saying.
people,
Yeah,
in addition to a world that beats us down, some of our peace movements, these maturity movements, all this stuff like that, it is oppression. It is literally shutting the Black man and Black woman's mouth. No, speak up for yourself.
advocate
Advocate
for
for yourself.
yourself.
Say something. Let your yeses be your yeses and let your no's be clear. No.
No,
And I think that we need to do that more and stop. I guess I feel like Malcolm X now and not Martin. Martin, stop
but you got the glasses on, so I mean,
pushing people into this space where they just have to say, turn the other cheek all the time. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes it is a personal test, turn the other cheek. But then often, sometimes you need to advocate for yourself, because what will happen is if you don't advocate for yourself for long enough, you'll become a pushover. You become a person that is weak. You become a person that is afraid of certain type of experiences or environments, and therefore, I believe that that negatively impacts your involvement in what you put out in the earth. And I consider
boundaries.
somebody
Yeah,
who used to be a people pleaser.
yeah.
When I started my journey to advocate for myself, my last 2 years in Chicago, it ruffled a lot of feathers. But now I have no problem saying absolutely not,
Yeah.
or you're wrong, or I am not going to accept that. But the peace thing is just, I think a few more people of color need to unsubscribe from that notion of always turning the other cheek.
I had to
No.
learn that lesson. I
Yeah.
grew up being a people pleaser, wanting to be like, didn't want to rock the boat. And I took on some things, and quietly it made me resentful. I was
Mhm.
unhappy because I did not speak up for myself. I did not advocate for myself. And I was sacrificing my discernment for the desire of community. Biggest mistake. And I had to learn, like, no, that's not okay. You don't accept this. Wanted to be, oh, she's so nice, she's so sweet. And through therapy, discovering why I was doing that, and it was like that was rooted in trauma. That was rooted in some other things. And once I learned and realized why I was doing that, it's like, okay, now we need to correct the behavior. Everyone is not gonna always like you. Sometimes you need to say no. Sometimes you should say no.
And
You
sometimes you will offend people, whether you
and
meant to
sometimes
or not.
yes.
If
Yes.
your intention, that's a space that I'm in. It's like I do recognize that me choosing to be me authentically, and me choosing even sometimes the things that I choose, is going to offend people. Now, my intention is not to offend you, but if you're offended by that, is your own personal business.
Right.
But I'm not going to no longer, well, this is me. I'm not taking the short end of the stick, because if I take it continuously, the world and life and people will continue to give you that. And I
Yeah.
deserve more than that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, that was the root of it, knowing worth,
Yeah.
understanding that, and saying I just had that conversation with someone earlier today, and was just talking about knowing what you deserve, what you truly deserve, really knowing your worth, really knowing your value.
Yeah.
And when you know your worth and your value, the price is the price. Like,
You have
quote
to
your price and
exercise.
don't flinch.
You have to exercise that. You have to, when
Yeah.
you identify, you have to exercise it, because if not, you will continuously to be in a place of less than. And that's not just a money thing. That's a
Yeah.
confidence thing. That's a strength thing. It's just like you continue to be in a place of less than. So I am definitely for people no longer, not always, or maybe people choosing to decrease the amount of times they turn the other cheek, and to speak up, advocate for
Absolutely.
yourself, defend yourself,
Defend
defend your
yourself.
name. Like, it's not all, and I'm not saying that certain religious beliefs do not have certain principles or pillars that say, certain things. That's up to you. But that you choose that part. But I do believe you can be a little bit more of like, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, but I can also respond to what happened to me.
I'm from Tennessee. I'm from Nashville. It's like, yes, but then the nook in my book and my spirit.
Yeah. I don't got to take it as far as you might have taken in your 20s, but it's like, no, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna receive you talking to me like this.
absolutely.
This may be your preferred method of communication with others, but however, but the way my life is set up, you're gonna have to address me differently, or you're just not gonna address me at all.
Yeah, what we talk about honor and respect, and those being keys and currency in this life. And we're not advocating violence, but we are saying, from a biblical standpoint, the Bible talks about your body is your temple. Well, if your temple is being desecrated, it's your responsibility to guard and protect it.
Advocacy.
Advocacy. I'm advocating for my temple.
People need to fight back a lot more.
Yeah. So I enjoyed this conversation. Before we wrap things up, Evan, do you have like any nuggets or takeaways that you want to leave with the audience? And then also where people can contact you on social media. And also, do you have anything new coming up as well?
Yeah, I appreciate being able to be a part of this experience, this conversation. I'm honored anytime somebody gives me the space to come in and to talk. And one of my personal commitments the last couple of years has been to show up and say how I really feel, not to show up and say what I know people want to hear.
Right.
Because I recognize there is a remnant of people who really may not always believe what the larger audiences are saying, or they need to know that somebody else feels the same way for them to further process that information to decide where they want to land. So thank you for allowing the space for me to come up here and be myself and disagree and agree with all kind of whatever it may be. So
I feel like it's healthy conversation.
Absolutely.
I think it's necessary. I think this is a safe space to have those conversations. I definitely respect your perspective. That's why I ask you back. It's always engaging and insightful, very intelligent and articulate. And I think we need to have more brothers in these spaces speaking up and having these conversations. So that's why I keep asking you back, just because you have something to offer and people need to hear it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Again, if you want to connect with me, you can follow me on social media. It's Coach Ev. It's the same on all platforms, from Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of them. It's Coach Ev. I would love to invite you into a bit of my world that I'm enjoying. And if I had to leave people with anything today, I would, in addition to saying advocate for yourself, fight back, I would say this life is short and people are transitioning out of this life younger and younger every single day. And so I would encourage somebody watching this just to live, whatever that looks like. Remove some of the pressures off of yourself and just live, because when this is over, no matter what you believe, unless you believe in reincarnation, you won't get another chance on this green earth. And I would not want you to be called home or called to your next place early, and there are things that you wish on your last couple breaths that you did that you could have done. I don't want that to be any of our stories. So I would just say, live, enjoy your life, make your mistakes, make your memories, and be happy, or at least try to find it, try to be happy. But definitely enjoy this life, because it's not going to last forever. I'm writing a paper right now on like food disparities and how the quality of life, or the average lifespan, has gone from like 82 years old down to like the 60s. Wow. And this is not just about the US. So it's globally, like a lot of stuff is happening inside of our bodies. So I have just been on a binge. People, enjoy your life, enjoy your days, take care of what you can, do what you can, but really just live, because when this is over, it's over.
That's good. I appreciate it, Evan. Thank you so much. Sit tight. Everyone, join us tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, with my guest, Dr. Robert Marshall. He'll be here. Just as a heads up, we're going to have a very, how can I say this? It's a good conversation, but we are going to cover a sensitive topic, so your discretion is advised. But be sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Also, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email at thespeakerpodcast@gmail.com. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok, y'all, at Camille.Essig. First of all, thank you again to our guest tonight, Coach Ev. We really appreciate you and cannot wait to have you back. Y'all stay tuned for tomorrow night. Y'all be blessed, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye. Peace.